heard about this, but some time ago I heard, well, the corridor is one of 10 places being designated as an autonomous vehicle proving ground. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. But what does that mean? I don't know anything about that. And I thought, before you know it, we could be driving down the road with a truck next to us and there's no driver in it. And maybe we should get somebody who knows all about this stuff to come tell us, what does this mean? What's it how it will impact us? And where we go from being designated to the future that'll be here before we know it. So I was told the expert is Daniel McGehee, who's director of the make sure I don't screw this up, UI Advanced Driving Simulator, and also one of the people coordinating the efforts in the corridor around autonomous vehicles. He is a professor of engineering, medicine, and public health at the University of Iowa, and has been involved in the field of research in the areas of vehicle safety for over 25 years. The part that I liked the most was on their website. It says, Daniel has been obsessed with car crashes for over 20 years. And I thought, well, we've got to definitely get this thing. So anyway, please join me in welcoming Daniel McGehee.
Thank you all for coming out today. It looks like a great crowd here. I'm really excited to be able to talk about something near and dear to my heart, and that is car crashes. Not accidents, crashes, because crashes have causes. And those of you that are in transportation and health, this is really an important nuance in terms of safety culture. So I'm going to talk about some technologies today that we're really fortunate to be able to be among the very first to be testing in the country as well as internationally here in Iowa. So I'm going to talk more generally just sort of about the future of automated driving, sort of where we've been and where we're going and what that means to you all out there, because the University of Iowa is one of the key players in this area here.
We're trying to maybe adjust the light, so please.
Yeah, we can go a little darker here. What I have here is a couple of pictures of some of our research vehicles and also the first Iowa official license plate, vanity plate ever issued, Automate. And those of you that maybe remember your high school chemistry, who knows what AU is? Gold. Okay, so we have a black and only those of you that are from Iowa will understand that. So this is one of our research vehicles that I hope that some of you will be able to come down and experience tonight at 9 o'clock on KJAN. They're doing a story on this vehicle and some of our research. So tune in to that. We got a chance to hang out with Scott Mathis for a couple of days to do that filming. But one of the things that's really the main headline that I want to take away, what you all to take away today, is that automation and these technologies are about reducing driver error. 94%, most broadly, 95% of crashes have some element of driver error or some willful component like speeding, excessive speed, and those kinds of things. That's an amazing statistic that's really difficult to deal with. So last year we killed 40,000 people on US roads alone. Over 1 million people worldwide died in roadway-related crashes, pedestrians, bicycles. In Iowa, 404 people lost their lives, a 27% increase from the year before. So this is a major public health issue that we don't really think about, and that's why the differentiation between the word accident and crash is an important one. And as I tell my colleagues in the media, if you ever use the word accident on the air or in your print, I won't talk to you again, because we need the public to know that every crash out there has a cause, and we need to describe what that is so that doesn't happen to them, whether they're texting, they're impaired, they're not wearing a seatbelt in the back seat, which is one of my pet peeves. We need to know what happened that relates to that injury or fatality. So I have the great fortune of leading this great set of laboratories at the University of Iowa. This is an $80 million driving simulator, the largest in the world. It's been operational for about 15 years. And so we get to test all of the advanced technologies in your car and come to the University of Iowa at some point in the last 25 years. We kind of work in about a 20-year forward time horizon. So the technologies that I'll be talking about today that are today just now coming in production into regular cars made their way through the University of Iowa about 20 years ago. So that's an exciting thing. So if you ever get a chance to come down and tour our labs, this is really a very interesting place that we're doing everything from studying the effects of cannabis in driving, a really big policy issue right now, not only in Iowa but across the country. Of course, alcohol, many different kinds of medications, and all those different kinds of technologies that are out there. So in addition to that, we have a full suite of research vehicles. Tomorrow we're going to be demonstrating for one of the local transportation agencies an inflatable car that we can drive vehicles that have crash avoidance technologies into, and we're going to be pretty safe. So that's a lot of fun to do that. So there's a couple terms that I want to go over today. Advanced driver assistance systems are the technologies that are here today and now are entering into inexpensive vehicles like the Chevy Cruze, the Ford Focus, the Honda Civic, the Toyota Corolla. These technologies you'll hear about: automatic emergency braking, lane keeping. All of those things are super important, and the main thing is they are here now. We can talk a lot about automated, autonomous, self-driving. That's way down the road, folks. This tends to get oversold by computer companies, by media, by other people. But the reality is the kinds of things that are going to save your life today is advanced driver assistance systems. And I'm going to kind of go through some of those. So we have lots of different sensors today. And again, this is today in production. So I'm just going to pick a car. I can talk about every single manufacturer, but let's just pick one, Subaru. They have a system called eyesight. It looks way down the road, like 200 yards down the road. It's using for something called adaptive cruise control, which is an extension of your cruise control where it actually locks onto the car ahead and will slow you down if you come across a slower moving truck. And even in traffic, in a 25-mile-an-hour zone, some vehicles like the Subaru will lock onto the car ahead and it will go all the way to a complete stop. From the rear, the Subaru has automatic braking, so you cannot back into a pole or a post or another car anymore. It doesn't allow you. You can floor it and it just won't go. Very important. Blind spot detection is important. Those of you who drive on 380, 80, those people that hang out in that blind spot, this kind of puts on a light and lets you know that somebody's there. Shorter out, we have pedestrian detection, which is really critical. Some countries like Sweden require vehicles that have pedestrian detection systems for 5 years now. So this technology has been around for a while, because in Europe, pedestrians get hit a lot more than they do here because there are many more urban areas and so forth out there. So when we talk about more highly automated vehicles, we're really kind of connecting the dots. And one of my favorite stories in this, when you take a look at the history of technology, there are a lot of early adopters. How many out there consider yourself like an early adopter? You get the next iPhone, you buy like cool stuff. Yeah, quite a few people out there. But the early adopter car back in 1958 was the Chrysler Imperial. This had the very first electronic cruise control of any car that just about everybody out there has electronic cruise control. And this is a form of automation. This is the first automation that went into production in 1958. So you say, automation, how does that work? Well, guess what? When you lock your speed at, say, 70 miles an hour when you're on Interstate 380, it automates the function of you pressing on the gas. It will coast. It's not going to put on the brakes, but it's going to maintain a speed. It's automating your speed control. This car was super high tech. It even had the hi-fi. And this was a record player in what our daughter way back when used to call the glove department. So this is the kind of thing that they were looking for people to buy, this high-tech stuff. So in 2017, fast forward, the Tesla has also something called Autopilot, which is on the highway full automation. So when we get on Interstate 380, I can press a button and the car takes control of steering, braking, everything else. If I want to change lanes, I don't touch the steering wheel, I just touch the turn signal stalk and it changes lanes for you. So this is in production today. You can buy this car. We build all sorts of other fancy sensors and technologies and computers on top of the one that we have. It has a 17-inch display right here. There are no knobs in this car. It's all touchscreen. So very different kind of driving. Adaptive cruise control came out in about 1998 in really high-end cars like BMWs, Audis, Mercedes, and so forth. And that's the technology that you can buy now for about $20,000 in a Civic, Corolla, and other cars. And that locks you onto the car head, puts on the brakes. Really cool technology. Next car you get, you gotta have that. Stop and go ACC brings that down. It will brake all the way to a stop very smoothly. In fact, if I put a blindfold on you, put you in a Volvo, a Subaru, a Chevy Impala, you pick the car company that has full range or stop and go ACC, you won't know that I'm not braking, that a computer is controlling all of that. It's really good, very good stuff. Here's a Subaru. I'm going to go through a couple of companies, Subaru Eyesight and Volvo. They work very similar. All the companies have some kind of computer vision system. The Subaru has stereoscopic vision. It has essentially two eyeballs, just like we have generally. They call it eyesight. What it does is it sort of puts together and sees everything that's out there and draws a box around it. So it just measures the change in the size of a box as you're getting close to it. So a pedestrian gets a vertical rectangle, a car ahead of you gets a square, a motorcycle gets a vertical rectangle. So it can track dozens and dozens of different targets. I kind of hesitate to call pedestrians targets, but this is really important technology. So these cars can brake at the very last moment. If a person walks out in front of you, say 30 feet ahead, it will automatically put on the brakes. Volvo has a system called City Safety that's been required by the Swedish government for several years now. It uses cameras and lasers and radar to do the same thing. You can't really see very well, but it's drawing boxes around everything here too. We also have what's called cross-traffic alert. So one common crash scenario that we see, especially in older drivers, is they tend to turn in front of cars at left-hand turns, especially they get hit by younger drivers. And the reason why older drivers get hit by younger drivers in this exact scenario is that younger drivers are generally driving faster than the rest of the traffic. So we have a certain expectation of how fast cars are coming towards us in that kind of scenario. We have a difficult time in general perceiving speed, and older drivers even more so. So a number of vehicles like the Volvo actually won't let you turn left if it's detecting a car that's approaching you. It puts on the brakes before you turn in front of them. So consumer acceptance is really key to this area. So write this website down, mycardoeswhat.org. This is a project I've been leading with our partners at the National Safety Council. This is now the largest public service campaign around vehicle safety technologies in history. We just passed 6.4 billion with a B media impressions on this project. It's really exciting. We have some 40 different safety technologies on cars. And so we went out, and what do? You get a guy and his dog to talk about all these interesting technologies, and that kind of saves the world. If you can have a guy and his dog talk about these fancy technologies, then people are going to start to understand it. This is a big gap, is that right now, if you take a look at the last 20 years of the kinds of safety technologies that have come onto our cars, analog brakes came out in 1996. Most of you have analog brake systems, but it was almost 15 years till the next technology came on, electronic stability control, which stabilizes your car so you don't spin out like in snow and so forth. But this year there are some 20 technologies that are just completely reigning into cars today, and it's very important that we understand how they work so we can use them best to our advantage. So the main headline, like I said, is technology is here today. Here's the Chevy Cruze, here's the Honda Civic. Again, I can talk about every single manufacturer has these technologies, so I'm not marketing any particular one. These are just used for examples. Now, the other important element that we're working for, in fact, Iowa is yet again the first in the country, the first in the world to do this, is we are defining some 1,300 miles of roadways in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty corridor, in the metro area, on our rural highways around here, freeways. Right now, your GPS system on your phone is good to about plus or minus 1 meter, so about 6 feet. So we can't really use that to drive it as a map. We can't control a vehicle based on that because it would put you into the other lane. So high definition mapping gets that 1 meter, plus or minus 1 meter, down to plus or minus 5 centimeters. So that we can use to augment all of these really cool sensors that we have on vehicles as a redundant piece of information. So the future of automated driving requires that we have many different systems checking each other because safety is absolutely key. One crash, one fatality will slow down and interrupt all of the really great advances that we're making in this space. So high definition mapping, the Iowa DOT is the first to invest in this along with Iowa Economic Development. And what we're hoping is, and we're already seeing this, the first day that we announced this project and then we were designated by the USDOT as a proving ground, I had a major automaker come the same day that this was announced and say, we're going to give you a couple $1 million to do our testing. So that was the very first day. From there, we have a number of other manufacturers and suppliers that are coming here. So it's a great investment to come to Iowa to do this kind of research. Because the next generation of automotive technology is not going to be controlled by 12 car makers. It's going to be, there are thousands of small companies that have 8 or 10 engineers, computer scientists, and other people putting this together. So it's really not about attracting a huge company to come here. It's about putting together a business climate to attract lots of little small companies to come here and use this kind of data. So what we're doing as one of the lead partners for the Iowa DOT is that we're putting together a research climate so that people come and do testing for free. We let them get onto this HD map for free. That's really attractive because it doesn't exist anywhere outside of Google's own proprietary mapping. Microsoft and most car companies have their own proprietary maps, but they don't let anybody else drive those maps. So once you develop a product with one of those companies, then the state will license the product, so they'll take a small piece of that just to try to regenerate kind of the funding from that. So this is a really exciting opportunity, and I think one of the things that we have to be really proud about in Iowa is that we can put together this kind of thing, that our leaders have the vision to be able to put this kind of thing together, because most state DOTs don't have that kind of vision, so it's really exciting. So this is kind of a blurry shot of where we're going to be mapping all around here: Cedar Rapids, the corridor, parts of Interstate 80, but all the metropolitan area. So again, this is a really big first out there. So this is a collaboration between the Iowa DOT, the National Advanced Driving Simulator, and this kind of hard to read Iowa City Area Development. We put this proposal together to the USDOT. 64 cities and universities put together proposals. They only awarded 10. And that's really gratifying because we've been in this space for a long time. So that was very intense competition out there. So these are the different sites around the country, from Florida, a couple in California, one in Texas. We're here in the Midwest. Our colleagues at the University of Wisconsin-Madison are there. Our colleagues at the University of Michigan, some other areas outside of New York City. And I'm going to read this quote from our former Secretary of Transportation, Anthony Fox, who said about this program: "The designated proving grounds will collectively form a community of practice around the testing and deployment of these automated vehicles. The group will openly share best practices for safe conduct and testing and operations of their development." And this is really key, is that the federal government is very interested in us working together to put together different practices and share those things so that we can form a consensus on the best way to test automated vehicles on the road. So very important to get that out there. So in terms of moving forward, right now we're in the next 6 months that we're putting together all sorts of local leaders here. I've talked to the Cedar Rapids City Councilors in Infrastructure Committee. We've talked to cities of Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty, county supervisors. I get to go brief our different transportation committees in Des Moines and the House and the Senate, work with them on really keeping them up to speed about how all this is coming together. We're in the process of putting together a demonstration of how we can show drivers real-time information when, let's just say, there's a crash on the road or a disabled vehicle on the road. How do we verify all that information, get it into the DOT system, and then display it to the driver in a safe way? We're doing that in about 6 months. About a year from now, 14 months from now, we're actually going to do a very highly automated drive on 380, where we're building a vehicle right now that can use this high definition mapping, all of the sensors that we have, to actually drive completely by itself using this high definition mapping and other information. Again, one of the first places to be able to do that in a public way. And then finally, the really important aspect that we want to take advantage of in Iowa is that we want to integrate our agriculture friends into this space. So right now, John Deere, other ag companies can do completely automated harvesting with their combines. But once they get to the edge of the field, that's where it stops. So we're working with John Deere and others to actually do a demonstration of taking it from farm to distribution center. And one area that we've been talking to is our friends at the Eastern Iowa Airport that have a number of farm plots around them. We have the ADM plant. This might be a really great local demonstration to show how we can do automated moving of goods from the field to those distribution centers. So that's an exciting, unique aspect that we can put onto this kind of work here in Iowa. Some of you want to say, gosh, now what would it be like to drive through an automated intersection where there are essentially no traffic lights? Because in the future, we're not going to have signs, we're not going to have traffic lights. Again, this is the long-range future. I don't want you to think this is coming anytime soon. 50 years from now, let's call it 50 years from now. We put together in the simulator what it might look like to drive through one of those intersections. So let's see if I can make this work. Well, maybe not. Well, it looks like I have a little burp here in the system, so we'll move on here. What I will show you is we have a business partnership memorandum of understanding with the Swedish government, Volvo, and Chalmers University. And Sweden is probably the most far-looking country in the world in terms of how they are planning for full implementation in urban areas of automated vehicles. And I want to kind of show you a quick 3-minute video of what they're just now sharing with the Swedish population about the government's vision about urban areas. And we'll bring that up here. And
much like all the other cities, and it constantly changes. We become more people, city grows, we build houses, more roads and parking lots, more vehicles. But human beings also need space. So what would happen if we drive away the cars of today? Start using autonomous cars instead. Autonomous cars don't need any signs. And autonomous cars need less space, enabling wider sidewalks. It creates more space for us humans.
So there you have sort of the utopian vision of Sweden, which is a little different than how we think about things, but it's nonetheless very interesting to see what's possible. So finally, I'll wrap up here to say that ADAS systems, advanced driver assistance systems, are here today. If you're in the market for a new car, ask for these kinds of things. Very important. They will save you, guarantee you that you will find that they trigger more than you might think. Don't worry about fully automated robots driving down Interstate 380 or 80 anytime soon. It's way off. The kinds of things that you will see in different corporate press releases and videos and even the media are highly scripted events. Certainly we can drive automated vehicles, but there's a big difference between testing and implementation. So think about what's possible today that can affect you and your family for the good. Follow this stuff. It's really, really cool. It's phenomenal. I've been doing the technology development side of this for about 25 years, and so what's really fun is to go down and drive a car that costs $20,000 that has technologies that we were testing here way back when to see how it's implemented. Remember, the driver error is really the key out there, and this is what we're trying to reduce. And finally, crashes are no accident. So remove that word from your vocabulary. Even in the industrial setting, you know, when big companies say we've had 33 accident-free days, or we had an accident, quote unquote, it's really important to describe what happened. A person fell off the ladder and broke their leg. Say what it was so that you can prevent it in the future. So that's really a key area there. And finally, thank you very much. You can find me at Dan Crashman on Twitter. So you can follow some of the work that we're doing, or certainly send me an email with any of your comments. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have out there. We're going to try to get a microphone out.
Yeah,
Did we get a microphone? No microphone?
if we used that one and you stood at
Yep, let's do that. Good idea.
My question would be about in that utopian scenario where they say that the electric or automated vehicles take less space and they can just drive off and park elsewhere, you know, outside the city core. In your field of study, are you envisioning where everyone still owns one or two or three vehicles and they're all automated? Or are you envisioning that it's sort of a summon kind of a thing where you just summon a vehicle when you walk out of work and then it takes you home and then goes off to pick up somebody else? So which scenario?
Yeah, really good question. So the future of driving 50 years from now, we will not own our cars anymore. And even today, cars are really much more appliances to us. I don't know how many of you out there used to change your own oil and have like a pair of racks in your garage. You won't find very many 25-year-olds that are going to do that in the future. We use cars quickly. We lease cars. It's probably the cheapest way to go. So cars really, they won't even really park. They will be moving all the time. As you said, they might go outside the city like in the middle of the night. But during the day, they're moving. And so when you are ready to leave your house at 7:45 in the morning or whatever time you leave, your patterns, your movement patterns will be known very well by the overall system. And so you essentially will summon that vehicle so that when you're ready, and even down to the point of, well, I got to eat breakfast and I'm going to brush my teeth, and I know that's going to take me 90 seconds to make it to my front door. There will be vehicles in your neighborhood that will just come and pick you up just in time, take you to work. When you want to leave for home, you have a fairly predictable time that you leave every day. So these vehicles will be roving, electric, automated vehicles. Again, very long-range future, 50 years from now. Okay.
Will you still have accessible vehicles?
Say what?
accessible, you know, like wheelchair accessible.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's going to be, in terms of increasing mobility for different populations, that's going to be really critical. I think the challenge will be is that while we can get you an automated vehicle to come to your house, it generally takes a person to help you get into that vehicle too. And I think that's one of the key pieces we have to figure out what we're going to do for certain accessibility issues. Yes?
I was just wondering, with some of this technology, can it inadvertently actually go against maybe that driver? So I have this in my car, I get in an accident or crash. I say I'm going 25 miles an hour, but the details in the car, the technology tell me I was going 65. And, good defense attorneys, prosecutors, actually use some of this information that maybe you don't even realize the car is collecting on you or your driving habits, and kind of use it against you. Do you see that happening now and in the future?
Yeah, so right now you own the data in your car. So there's most cars that have been built for the last 10 years have it's called an event data recorder. It's hooked to your airbag module. So if you have a crash where your airbag goes off, it will tell us in the last 5 seconds leading up to the airbag deployment what your speed was, whether your seatbelt was on, whether you were braking, accelerating, and a few other things. Some car makers have more information. You own those data unless somebody dies in that crash, or there's a lawsuit. Those data can be subpoenaed. In the automated vehicle future, again, the 50-year long-range future, there's an enormous amount of data that these vehicles collect. And even Google has, in their automated vehicle trials in Northern California, whenever there is a crash, and they generally get hit from behind, because they're in traffic all day long, stop and go traffic, a rear-end collision is the most common crash type. Slow speed, that you get hit by 5 miles an hour. They actually publish all of their data online. It's open to the public. You can go on and look at every single time Google's been involved in a crash, and I think 99% of them they're not at fault. They publish that information. In fact, states will require that automated vehicles publish their information. But it's not you're driving, it's the vehicle's performance. And so you're going to be out of that loop, so you won't have any responsibility in that crash. If you take a look at a couple of generations ago, elevators, if you read about when elevators went automated, right? For a long time, elevators all had operators. People sat in there and they manually controlled an elevator. And there was a really big public outcry. Well, there's no way that this is safe. And for the same reason, that somebody has to be responsible. So obviously driving is much more complicated, but in terms of assigning liability, those things are coming together right now.
You have mentioned vehicles. What is happening with like your sports riding of motorcycles, crotch rockets, and all of that? What's going to be coming back with these vehicles?
Well, I think that when you buy a motorcycle, you want to drive it. I haven't seen of any automated motorcycle trials, but I think what you're getting at is that there will be other manually operated vehicles in the environment in the future. What we will be doing in the long-term future is every vehicle essentially will be squawking information about itself. So how fast it's going, whether you're braking, your exact location, whether you're coming around a corner, all of those things. Cars will be, and vehicles will be talking to one another continuously, so we understand what everybody else is doing. So in the case of when you have like a construction zone, when I came up here around just south of the city, the lanes kind of narrow, traffic can all of a sudden slow down really quickly. Well, our systems will already know that the traffic is slowing down quickly to avoid some of those traffic conflicts and rear-end collisions. So every car will be talking to one another, traffic lights will be talking to cars, so there'll be a lot more communication out there. Yes?
Will communicating vehicles be able to identify non-communicating vehicles like a motorcycle?
Yeah, so the sensors that are available today detect motorcycles. So like I said before, it's all about redundancy. We want to get as many redundant signals as possible into the vehicle. And we always make the assumption that it's not talking.
Well, and even if that motorcycle has a driver, won't it still probably have technology that will be communicating with another vehicle?
Exactly. And there may be limiters on that too. If you're entering into a bunch of traffic, it's not going to let you drive 100 miles an hour. So you're talking about privacy information, or can you be more specific?
So people just like to have their car, and
Right.
you can stuff it full of your things and
Yes.
it's your space.
So this is really going to be a generational shift. If you take a look at especially urban areas today and the proliferation of Uber and Lyft, so ride sharing. My daughter lives in Washington, D.C., where she has access to a fabulous underground metro system. But if you look at what she spends in a month on Uber, about $200, and a metro, about $80 a month, it's way cheaper than owning a car. And you sort of adapt the way you look at transportation. I think today, and in our area, we don't have rail, other things, but Uber is actually pretty convenient. If you fly into the airport into Cedar Rapids, from the time you touch down, you can order an Uber that will meet you curbside. So it's very analogous to what Sweden is trying to plan, because Uber drivers hang out in downtown Iowa City, which is about 17 minutes out to the airport. So that's about how long it takes to, from the time you're taxiing in to the time you walk out on the curb, is about 17 minutes if everything goes okay. So those kinds of things are happening now for a lot of people, but it's not something that just one day we say, okay, you can't have your car anymore. This is over a very long period of time. So young drivers today that are 16, in their lifetime, it's going to transition away from that. And they're going to like that because, as I said, cars are really appliances now. They're not the personal, part of your personal identity and brand. People drive lots of different branded vehicles. You know, a generation ago, you used to buy a Chevy was your family, and that's what you had sometimes for generations. We don't do that. And so it's going to be an evolving process.
Are you looking at the security of this? My understanding is even with the level of autonomy that there is now, that there have been people who have hacked into those systems and then been able to control that vehicle, remotely, even compared to the person sitting in the car. So are you addressing that, and how are you addressing those security issues?
Yeah, security obviously in every single field is of paramount importance, and especially in the automotive context, because you can imagine if somebody were to hack into a Chevy Impala, for instance, and say at 5 o'clock today, I'm going to turn 100,000 Chevy Impala steering wheels 20 degrees to the right for 5 seconds. That would be catastrophic, and no car company, no supplier wants that to happen to them. So every company is investing mightily into computer security. In fact, there are very few cars that allow over-the-air updates and over-the-air access. Tesla is one of them, but they have practically military-level security, which is really necessary to be able to do that. We're going to see more car makers go that way, but it's going to be a very slow process because of that. There was one occasion about 5 years ago where a couple of computer scientists took a Jeep and they put it in their garage for a whole year, and they completely disassembled the computer code, called a journalist and said, we're going to go for a ride, and then drove him off the road in a safe way, but just drove him into a grass field to demonstrate that they could take over the vehicle control remotely. But it's one of the top areas in the auto industry right now, really critical.
Given the automated rideshare sort of future you talked about, how do you see that impacting conventional transit, specifically bus travel, in the future now?
I think conventional transit's going to be still vital. I mean, I think what you saw in the Swedish example is the way I see it sort of playing out. It's really about sort of the so-called last mile, right? So we'll still commute on our buses, but it's about getting from the bus to your home. And then outside of your commuting activity, how we go about using ride sharing. But no, I think that transit is a key part of the future.
How do you see the role of car seats, newborns, babies, toddlers? Do you think that the car seats will go away because they don't need that impact safety, or do you see certain vehicles like the accessible vehicles having those available? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think as a guy who studies crashes for a living, that we're always going to need those really good car seats out there. I think that's still, crash testing is going to be an important part, because these cars will still crash. There's no doubt. We hope that they're not going to crash at the same speeds that we do now. Most fatal crashes in North America occur on rural highways, Highway 1, Highway 6, where you drop a wheel, you overcorrect, you go into the ditch, you hit a tree, you hit a culvert, those kinds of scenarios. That's how we die in North America. And so those kinds of scenarios will be eliminated or reduced drastically under a different kind of control system. Yes?
I have two concerns. Well, I have many concerns, but two major ones based on what you're saying. One is that period of time when the period of time when we're going to have partial automation, like we saw with the Tesla crash, where you have a driver who gets complacent, doesn't really pay attention anymore. That's sort of the nature of the human being. It's why Google decided not to do partial autonomy. And the other concern is I'm not seeing that much in terms of accessibility considerations on the part of the car companies. I see that on those little AV transit shuttle manufacturers. They're making accessible vehicles, but I'm not seeing any attention from the car companies on that, even though they're spending billions investing in technology.
Yeah, so your first question that has to do with sort of the level of automation. So you have sort of the most extreme automation, which is a complete robot, driving your car. There's no steering wheel, there's no brake, there's no way to take over them. You can hit like an emergency stop or something like that, perhaps. Versus the kind of mid-level automation, for lack of a better word. I mean, there are ways to define automation, but where the driver is still very much in control today. Advanced driver assistance systems are really not automation per se. Tesla has some automation that's changed since that crash. In fact, last week we had the chief crash investigator of the National Transportation Safety Board at the University of Iowa that gave the first public briefing on that Tesla crash. And we were able to contribute to that investigation because we do some of that work. But systems out there right now, the way they monitor the driver, like Tesla, it requires you to hold the wheel about every 90 seconds or put some sort of steering input to let the system know that you're still actively engaged, quote unquote. Cadillac has a new system called Super Cruise that's coming out, where it has a little computer vision system that's behind the steering wheel that actually looks at your eyes. And if you look away from the road for more than even 3 or 4 seconds, it gets kind of grumpy. So it's something that we think is a really important issue. You raise a very, very critical issue because we are not good at monitoring things. So whether you're an airplane pilot, work in a nuclear power control room, or you're driving a train, we are not good at just studying and watching a computer drive. We have to have some sort of activity. And that's why Google has made the decision to sort of remove the driver altogether, so there is no interaction, period. But again, that's to make that work in traffic. I mean, some of the sort of narrow gauge microbus transit areas are in very controlled access areas. And in terms of access and mobility, I think that will come because if you look at the vehicles that are being developed right now, so let's say the Chrysler Pacifica is being used by Google right now for a fully automated trial. The Chrysler Pacifica can be retrofitted for accessibility. So it's really taking a vehicle like a van, a minivan, and retrofitting it just like we do today, except it's going to have a different kind of control structure on the front, in the driver area. So I think that's going to come. I think the bigger issue is how do we get to the curb, to the car, and then out of the car again. That's the area that I think is sort of the gap. Because we can get the car to your doorstep and to your driveway, but how do we get you into the car by yourself? And then once you get to the store, how do we get you into the store to do your thing? So it's like we're really good at that middle part, but it's the ends that are my concern.
I just have a comment. As a mom with very active children, with bleacher seats, coolers, tents for shade, and you keep it stored in your minivan, while they're doing their deal and you have a break, and it's an all-day affair, 2-3 hours away from home, football games, rain gear, blankets. I just
be with the active kids we have today? And what would you do with everything you store in your minivans during those
Yeah, I mean,
hours of all day long?
and I've lived that world, and I agree that I think when we had a minivan, it was just like a mobile storage unit. But I think things are gonna slowly change in terms of what our expectation today is to be able to schlep around all that stuff. 50 years from now, when you're a great grandmother, you're going to be really happy to be able to have that car pick you up and get taken to Des Moines for that soccer game out there. So again, this is not going to happen overnight for inconvenience. I think the way our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids are going to think about transportation is going to be very different about how it is today. I see it already in my daughter, who's like, I'm never going to own a car. Why would I do that? Because I got to park it, I got to pay for parking, got to go get it, I got to park in this parking garage on the 6th floor, and all the cars are all backed up. It takes me a half an hour to get out. It's like, I'm just going to get picked up at the curb on Uber and go. You know, it's expensive, but you know, cars are expensive. Maintenance, gas, parking, buying it, the capital expense. You look at what we actually pay every month for a car, it's really expensive. Even a used car, it's expensive.
I wonder if you could speak to the variability of road conditions with the weather, just anticipating when you're coming. And
Great question. Oh my gosh, awful. Yeah, ain't gonna work. We're stuck in our houses. We're gonna be homebound commuters during the winter. Today, yeah, it's a huge problem. Tomorrow, as we get better mapping, it's going to help, but it's going to be a big issue. But the really good thing is that when I talked about vehicle-to-vehicle communication, is that our wheels, as they contact the road, our tires as they contact the road, are really sophisticated sensors today. So some of you bought a car in the last 5 years or so, 8 years, even 10 years, have a technology called electronic stability control, and that is where the wheels are constantly testing how they're slipping on the road. We can take that same information and say, let's say you hit a piece of black ice or a slippery spot on the highway. Well, that car, your car, is going to talk to the next car behind you and said, hey, I just slipped here at this exact location with plus or minus 5 centimeters. Slow down and get ready to hit that kind of patch. And then as every car goes over that and it gets warmer and it doesn't slip as much, that information gets communicated back and forth. So think about this as just an amazing communication network to say, hey, I'm here, I'm slipping. It tells the next person behind you, okay, I'm getting ready to go over that little patch that lasts for like 3 or 4 seconds.
This is going to be our last question for this segment.
Whatever you do.
No pressure. Well, the first part is, say 50 years from now, when these things become more and more prevalent, if I want to take my family on a nice cross-country road trip to Wally World, like Clark Griswold, am I going to be able to do that? And then the second part is, do you think that the new Federal Highway Administrator, Paul Trombino, being from Iowa, will be able to help in a special way our efforts here in the corridor?
Yeah, so the first question about your road trip across the country is absolutely. So if you think about how we rent cars, so you can go to the Cedar Rapids Airport and rent a little car that's going to fit you and your suitcase, and that's about it, or you can rent a minivan. So same thing, you just have to, on your smartphone, say, I want to go from here to Salt Lake City or to the Wasatch Mountains, and it'll say, okay, here's a route, and how many people you want to go, how much space do you want, and a car will come and pick you up and take you there. So you essentially would own, be in that car like a rental car for that week, and just sort of telling it where you're going to take you. Again, long-range future. So, and the second question, Paul Trombino is a former Iowa DOT director, has just been named as the Federal Highway Administration administrator for the federal government. So he's responsible for all of the infrastructure in the U.S. When we got that announcement, I texted him right away because we got the great pleasure to work with him. We're talking to him right now about how that's going to help Iowa. So we think that's a huge advantage because a lot of the HD mapping work that I talked about today was his vision. And so what I'm proposing right now to the USDOT, in fact, I'm going to Washington in a couple of weeks. I'm proposing an Eisenhower style federal freeway program that HD maps all of our major freeways in the US. And that's who I'm going to be talking to about that.
Great, thank you, Daniel, very much. Please thank Daniel. And